Welcome to Kibbe on Liberty. We're broadcasting almost live at the Atlas Network meeting in New York City, and I'm talking to my friend who grew up under Mao's China. We're going to hear some horror stories. We're going to talk about Hong Kong, and we're going to talk about why kids should step off the ledge when it comes to socialism. Check it out. So Li, hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Good.
You just got back from Vienna, Austria, and you've been globetrotting all over the place. What were you up to? Well, I guess Prague is where you were last. What was going on in Prague?
There was a Hackers Congress, their 6th annual convention, to talk about opt-out. So I went there to give a talk on my personal story, my experience growing up and living in China for 26 years. And if we don't opt out, we might lose, we will lose our lives.
So hackers all over the world are sort of romantic and optimistic about cryptocurrencies and crypto everything,
Right.
as a way to opt out around government controls and all of that. And I happen to agree with that. We had Patrick Byrne on this show just a little bit ago, and he was talking about blockchain solutions to everything from voting to stock markets to privacy and all of this stuff. And I think there's something to it. I think there's an opportunity to do things without the government controlling our behavior, and that of course is everything that you believe in.
Yes. And one interesting thing, I don't know how to put it, it was at the convention, the Hackers Congress conference, almost everybody was in black. And I thought,
It's the uniform.
yeah. You have to, how easy people want to belong to some kind of identity or group, consciously or subconsciously, and that's kind of dangerous because the communists use that people's way of thinking to bring people into some kind of uniformity.
Groupthink.
Yeah, groupthink.
Yeah.
And so they were very good at that, getting people to think as one, behave as one, and doing things in unison.
It's kind of ironic that libertarians also fall into sort of tribal behavior,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, but I've run into that, and of course the favorite tribal behavior of libertarians is to sort of prove that you're more libertarian than the next guy. But I want to talk about, you mentioned this, and I want to get into your experience with communism under Mao in China. We've talked about this before, but I think a lot of my listeners haven't heard this story yet, and why it matters to what's going on in the communist governed Beijing today, and why their reaction to the Hong Kong protesters is so hysterical. But I want to start with a poll that I saw just the other day. And there's an American foundation called the Victims of Communism Foundation, and they do this poll every year, and every year the numbers get a little bit worse, measuring essentially what young people think about socialism versus capitalism. And some of it I think is designed to shock people and ask questions a certain way, because I'm not sure young people even know the context of some of the words that are being used here. But that said, only 57% of millennials believe the Declaration of Independence better guarantees freedom and equality over the Communist Manifesto.
What?
Can you believe that?
What? Only 57%?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
And I worry about this. I mean, we spend all of our time trying to make sure that young people even, like, do you know what the Communist Manifesto is? Do you know what the Declaration of Independence says? And I suspect the answer is usually maybe not, because our education system doesn't necessarily teach those core values in school anymore. But you know what the Communist Manifesto means in practice. You lived through it.
Yes.
And tell everybody a little bit of your history. You were born in China. What year?
1958.
1958.
That's the year of Great Leap Forward.
Yes. And what was the Great Leap Forward?
The Great Leap Forward was a stupid idea by Mao Zedong, and he thought China can become world economic power and whatever power just simply by producing more iron than United States and Great Britain. So he believed China, in 3 to 5 years, China can surpass United States and Great Britain in the production of iron. And in order to do that, he made the whole country stop everything else and produce iron. All the trees were cut down to burn, furnitures, wood, things, most of them were burned to be as a fuel to produce iron. Everybody, regardless you know how to do, what to do or not, even kids. And most people didn't know how to produce iron. They simply just used the furniture to melt down their pots and pans and then present it to the government. We have 5 kilos of iron produced. And it's laughable. But that time, either by force or by really naive believing the government, everybody was involved. And so most things were destroyed, and things need to be produced were not produced. And immediately following that was a famine of 3 years.
Because one of the main things that happened is that peasant farmers who were producing the food that kept people fed were forced to suddenly become steel producers, and they couldn't have known how to do that.
Yes, and also because that time it just after they nationalized everything, so farmers no longer own the land. They have been tilling for generations, and then also they were no longer allowed to make decisions on what to plant and how to plant. So everything have to be everything was decided by the central government, and the central government had no idea about farming or specific area farming, but telling the farmers how to plant, what to plant. Of course, nothing really came out of the that kind of planned economy. Also, some people, some farmers tried to please the government and fabricated some kind of harvest and told the government, we can produce this much grain per acre. And central government used that as the standard for the whole country.
But they were made up numbers.
They made up, not just made up numbers, they used all the seeds and all the fertilizer in one piece of land, and they sent people go inside to use the fan to ventilation because they're too thick. They couldn't grow, and they used all kind of measure. And then they invite Mao to visit them. They put the little kids on top of the stalks of wheat. See how thick, how strong. Even the kids can lay on this. And Mao was so happy. Wow, per acre you can produce this much? Okay, great. The whole country has to use this number. And they show the pictures, and the other farmers were laughing. But nobody dared to say anything, because if you laugh, you tell them that's not true, you're dead. So all things add together. The peasants became the poorest people in the country, starving. The peasants, they were starving because all the harvest was taken away. And Mao wasn't starving because he took all the food.
Yes, the elites were fine, but mass starvation amongst poor farmers. Stalin supposedly said that, one person dead from starvation is a tragedy. 1 million starved people are a statistic. And Mao has said similarly evil things, but, in total, Mao killed 45 million people, most from starvation in the Great Leap Forward. And I think people have a hard time even conceiving of a number that massive. It's impossible to believe even.
Yes, and China at that time is not as numerous as today, 1.4 billion, but yes, a lot of people. Every family you ask has some members of the family dead, either by torture, by starvation, by imprisoning, and by hard labor. Yeah. Every family.
So I want to get back to your personal story, but one of the we're free market libertarians. We both like Austrian economics, and of course Friedrich Hayek's critique of socialist planning was that no single person could know enough to organize a complex economy. And Mao's experiment in the Great Leap Forward, transitioning a rural farming society to an industrial powerhouse, is sort of a caricature. It's an extreme example of how one person doesn't know, but it applies to everything. And this is one of the things we struggle to explain to people that want to try socialism, is that there's no way for anybody to know enough to tell us how to live our lives, essentially. And you would think that would be a more persuasive argument, but I don't know.
Well, they didn't put it that way. They put it in a way, said, I know better than you. So if you listen to me and follow my instruction, you will have a worry-free life, and you don't need to work hard. You don't need to think. You will just be happy all the time. And you're so happy, you don't want to just sit there, so you may want to do some work, but it's not going to be hard, and you don't need to worry about how much you produce, because we're going to feed you. You will have unlimited supply of food and everything you need. We will give it to you. So a lot of people thought, wow, that's great. I don't want to work hard. I don't want to budget my income, my food. I love that. And you take care of me. And so a lot of people followed and believed, because they didn't trust themselves of making decisions. And they thought, oh, government is so powerful, so strong, they're so intelligent. They know better than me how to live my life. So they gave up. But after they gave up, they realized it was wrong, but they couldn't get it back anymore.
It was too late.
Too late.
Yeah. some of those promises resonate with young people today, which is why you tell your story. And let's get into that. Your family was a so-called black family, and explain the difference between black families and red families.
Yes. The Chinese government divided people into two categories, red and black. I'm not sure about the red because I was born into a black family. At the beginning, there are 5 blacks. Number 1, property owners. Number 2, rich people. Today, I realize what rich people mean. It means you can feed yourself. Number 3, counter-revolutionaries. Say no to communism or doesn't agree with communism. Number 4 was the funniest, is the bad people. We said, who are the bad people? Oh, anybody we don't like is bad people. And then number 5 is right wing. Right wing at that time is anybody give suggestions to the Communist Party, say you should do things differently in order to help the country, or criticize them, that those are right wing. So these are 5 categories for black. Later on, they expanded to 9 categories. Educated people, people spoke foreign languages, who has relatives outside of China. And these are not just one generation or you. It's 8 generations. For me, I was born into black family. I didn't belong to any categories, but my ancestors, some of my ancestors belong to one or multiple categories. That's why we never had chance to change. It's just black.
Why was your family deemed black?
I think 4 generations before me, they were highly educated. Many of them went abroad to study, Japan, England, United States, and many of them are pioneers of capitalists in China during the turn of 20th century. They were bankers, industrialists, entrepreneurs. So collectively, they were they were the shakers and movers of modern China. And they contribute so much. And so they all the kind of people the communists didn't like.
Yeah.
So, of course, these families are married to each other. So and families from all directions, all black.
So you really didn't stand a chance because
No.
you had all of the wrong characteristics in your family.
Right. And when I was in first grade, elementary school, I remember I was not allowed to participate at any extracurricular activities. I couldn't learn dance, I couldn't learn sing, I couldn't learn music instrument, I couldn't play sports. Just basically besides going to school, I was not allowed to do anything. And even going to school, we were segregated. Even the seating and the things we could say, running for student president, something, nothing.
So you were, this makes perhaps light of it, but you were a second-class citizen.
Oh, yeah.
You were separate and treated differently.
We have to sit in a different part of the train.
Yeah, yeah. What? Tell me some of these. We've talked about these stories before, but getting back to sort of centralized communist farming, you were. Is enslaved too strong of a word? Because you were put to work as a small girl in some of these ridiculous experiments in agriculture reform.
Actually, I used the word exile because I was born in the city. My parents are educated, medical doctor and university professors. But in 1969, the government relocated us to a remote village. I remember it took us a week to get there. Train, boat, truck, and basically kind of like tractor haul us to this village. The language was totally different. We couldn't understand people were speaking. They were Cantonese. We were in the Mandarin-speaking cities before. And then there's no electricity. If you think about from the history perspective, maybe in the United States 500 years ago was like that. No running water, no toilet, there's no place to live. We were just dropped over there as punishment. And they call reeducation. So we suddenly end up there. We have to make a living. So we found this Buddhist temple was vandalized, broke down. And we used some crates, boxes, to divide it into rooms. And the floor was just mud. And that's our home. We have a board. And my family are so westernized. They say we can't just sleep on the board, so we found some hay and put on the board to make it softer. And oil lantern. I was 11 years old. My brother was 9. We learned to find a river to carry water home. We have a big jar, and the water was so muddy. We learned to put lime in the water to make the mud sink to the bottom so the surface water will be clear enough to drink. We go to the mountain to find trees to cut. Actually, it's not our trees, it's nobody's trees. So everybody did that. So we did that, went to the mountains and find first branches, later just trees to cut and bring home to burn as a fuel or to cook and to heat. And it just suddenly, from a civilized society and being dropped into a 500-year difference, uncivilized world. And because Mao believed the education you received are evil. So you have to receive education from the peasants, from the poorest people, from the working people. So many, many people were punished that way. We're not the only family. And a lot of the family was taken apart because they were sent the wife this way, husband that way, the children in another way, another place in the country. So our family said, no matter what, we're going to live together and die together. So we kind of volunteered to say, send us to the poorest place as long as our family can be together. So that's how we did. We were there for 9 years. So suddenly there's no schools. We have to work. School is just work. Little kids have to work. And my poor mother, English professor, there's no schools. And she has nothing to do. And my father was a medical doctor, a surgeon, and he needed help to do surgery because a doctor everybody needs. So my mom, just without any training, became a partner with my dad doing surgery and treat patients just like that. And we were watched by the peasants because they got a job to watch us, monitor us, to see if we say anything bad, we behave any way bad. And of course, we don't dare to eat things. We don't dare to cook things differently because my family, when I was growing up in the cities, we make same potato, we make potato salad instead of just boiled potato dipped in salt. So we don't dare to eat it that way anymore because
it's different.
That's not communism. That's bourgeoisie. And we don't dare to say anything or complain. We have to pretend to be very, very happy there.
Yeah. Mao's Great Leap Forward happened, was it 1958, 1959?
57, 58, 59.
Yeah. And that was a colossal failure.
Oh, yes.
And it failed to industrialize the country, and so many people starved. And Mao was getting pushback within the Communist Party. So, and correct me on my history, he immediately launched the Cultural Revolution. Was your re-education part of the Cultural Revolution?
Yes, actually, 1965, right after the famine.
Yeah.
And they just like what Lenin did, temporarily, they told the farmers, now you can just use that piece of land as yourselves, and you don't have the ownership, but you can have the ownership mentality to treat the land and plant. So immediately that year, 1965, everything became very good. There's almost enough food.
Production picked up again.
Yes.
And farmers that knew how to farm were allowed to do that,
yes,
at least temporarily.
And they get to keep their
importantly, yeah, they get to keep the food they produce.
That's the most important. So they have motivation.
Yeah.
And the city allowed fashion. That time, fashion. They allowed music. Especially Shanghai used to be very westernized, and people are happy. They have restaurants to go to. They can have dance parties, because my grandparents, they were very active. They have parties, dance, and music, and going out to eat and drink. Everybody was very happy. And right after that, only 1 year, Mao said, no, we didn't succeed with controlling these economic sectors. I need to control people's mind. He wants to use his own thinking to unify the entire population's way of thinking, one thinking. So that's his reason for starting the Cultural Revolution.
Yeah, and that's where the sort of cultural authoritarianism, the idea, like, he wasn't just an economic planner anymore. He was God.
Yes.
And he decided that how everyone would be the same.
Yes, you have to think exactly the same way. That's the horrifying factor today is Xi Jinping is doing exactly the same thing. He wants everybody to think the way he thinks. Trying to make everybody think the way he thinks. And he doesn't really brave enough to say my way of thinking. He bring back Mao.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people are confused about that, because there's clearly, maybe like 1965, there is a modicum of freedom when it comes to production, economic production. And in some ways, China is a very productive economy, but that authoritarian need to control the minds of the people and to control their behavior and to subjugate them, that's never gone away.
Yeah. A very interesting story. 1965, I mentioned fashion was allowed. And that time, for some reason, people like very tight pants. So 66, Cultural Revolution started. So you see the Red Guards holding a beer bottle, or usually it's not for beer, for soy sauce or vinegar, on the street. And they catch people with those fashionable clothing. They will put the bottle in your pants. If it's too small, the bottle doesn't fit, that's bad, so the pants get cut off.
Wow.
And so you see those Red Guards with a bottle on the street, because everybody have to dress the
literally fashion police.
Right.
Yeah.
Hair, they cut your hair if your hair is too long. They cut your clothes if the clothes is too fashionable. And they go to your house and see what you eat. And they will take your food away if you have beautiful food.
There's something about communism, because one of the stories that isn't told that much, like going after fashion and prohibiting music,
right,
and targeting artists and poets because they're free thinkers. And I think young socialists today in America don't associate any of that sort of authoritarianism with what they hope is this, new democratic socialism. But the first thing you do is stop the free-thinking, free-spirited behavior, because it's all about controlling the minds of the people more than it is about controlling the economy.
Right. That's the most core value of communism. Just like you said, you can't not think any differently. You have to think in the one way they want you to think. Of course, from the thinking, then everything else applied. For China, the number one thing is they close all schools and all libraries. And the books, we had a lot of books. Books became crime evidence. So we sold our books as used paper by the weight. We didn't throw them away because we had all school closed, so my mom has no more salary. So we have to sell books. We sell everything we can sell to get by, to buy food. Yeah, our libraries closed. Readings are limited to certain books. I remember when I was in the age that I was hungry for books for reading, I remember the whole China published 1 or 2 books a year. They just reprint Mao's book. That's all we get to read and memorize. We're forced to memorize. And the music, all band music, and Mao's wife was a movie actress. So she came up with 8 productions of one ballet, a couple of Peking opera, and 8 pieces. So for 10 years, those only 8 pieces were allowed to perform as entertainment. And we all learned how to sing that. And the ballet was just troops using guns and dancing with guns and things like that. And that's her design, her production, and clothes. She designed one dress. And everybody who can afford and who want to wear a dress have to wear that. Otherwise, it's just military uniform style and the same color. And, because they believe if you have desire, freedom to choose your style, and then you're not communist enough, because you have to. It's just like religion. You have to get rid of everything your mind will want to think for yourself. thinking for yourself is the biggest no-no. I get my report card from school always labeled anarcho-list, thinking for yourself, and only care about yourself. Those are really, really bad behavior, and they need to get rid of that. So a lot of people want to prove they're pure to communists. Every morning they will go confess. Sorry, Mao, Chairman Mao, in front of Mao's portrait. I thought for myself yesterday, and this and that. I'm so sorry. I will never do that again. Every day they have a meeting. They call it Fight for Self-Awareness. That's everyday first thing. You go to school, you go to work, you go to a meeting, and overcome your self-awareness.
And the way that all of this is enforced, I mean, the Cultural
Yes.
Revolution was about violence,
Yes.
and not just violence that you would expect if you did certain things wrong. There would be random ceremonial executions in the street, right?
Yes. You
'Cause-
don't even know what you did wrong.
Yeah,
And
and it's all about terror.
exactly. And one person, he has some kind of disability. He couldn't laugh. He couldn't smile, laugh, and become a crime. So they forced him smile in front of Mao's portrait. He couldn't do it because he's a disability on his facial muscle. So he was tortured, and they label him, you hate Mao, you hate communists. That's why you never smile in front of Mao's portrait. So they tie him up on a chair, tickle his bottom of his feet with a feather, and tickle him there and there. He just couldn't. He just go like this, the most he could do.
Yeah.
So he was tortured and imprisoned and lost his job, everything. After the Cultural Revolution, one day he was home and watching TV. There's something not very funny, just a comedy show. And he started to laugh. He couldn't stop. He was on the floor and rolling, and his wife was crying. So why did you laugh him so late? We suffer for 10 years. Now you can laugh. It's so sad.
Yeah. Let's talk about that sort of need to control, and you already mentioned President Xi and the current communist government in Beijing, and their hyperbolic, insane reaction to protesters in Hong Kong. Because I think you just gave us the historical context for what's going on. Because the idea that free-minded people in Hong Kong would show up in the streets to protest overreach by the mainland Chinese government in what is supposed to be an autonomous city, Hong Kong. What's going on there?
That's the nature of communism. They promised Hong Kong one country, two system, which means like Hong Kong people decide for their own lives and their economy and everything. But the nature of communism is never let other people have their freedom of choice, of control of their own lives. That's not the characteristic of communism. So they said that, but they will not do it. They cannot do that. So they want the control. They told Hong Kong people, you can freely elect your governor, but I give you the candidates. I give you 5 or 10 candidates. You can only elect from these candidates. That's not freedom of choice. And Hong Kong people, economy. They penetrate into all the sectors with the Chinese government state-owned bank and money. And they make a lot of regulations according to their value. And they control the land, they control the housing. It's just every aspect. But the Hong Kong people had the tradition of free economic freedom and political freedom, and the people their education system was not the communist, so they were educated with a free mind.
You think about it, most people in Hong Kong would check almost every box in the blacklist.
Yes, almost everybody.
They're guilty of all of those sins. They're educated,
exactly.
They're free, they're prosperous, and that is a direct threat.
Exactly.
To control in Beijing.
And first, the communists thought if we still maintain the life standard for the Hong Kong people, they just love money, they love good food. If we don't touch that area, Hong Kong people will be fine. No, people, it's not just for their stomach. They live for more than that. And so they underestimated people with the ability to think and educated under that. So the Hong Kong people saw what's going on. They said, no, we don't want to be part of China in that sense. In nationality, I can say I'm Chinese, but I don't want to say communist government is China. That's Hong Kong people's perception. I'm Chinese, but communist government is not China. So, but then they realize they cannot separate that.
Yeah.
They will be governed by the communists. They thought they wouldn't. They didn't have to. And
well, they were promised.
Yeah, they promised.
Yeah.
They trust. I never trust communists. Give you one example. My grandfather passed away, and he said, "Don't bury me. Just wait. The grandma passed away. Put our ashes together and scattered into the sea." And then, but my grandmother lived very long life, so my grandfather's ash was at home for too long. My cousin is superstitious, thought that caused my child get sick, this and that. So she want to buy a plot, a cemetery plot, to bury my grandfather's ash. And she asked me, because I'm the firstborn grandchild. I said, no. She said, why? I said, I don't trust the communist government, because you thought your ancestors buried here. Tomorrow, if they want something else to use that piece of land, or for some reason, they would dig out your ash or your bones and throw it away, because that's what happened to us. During the Cultural Revolution, a lot of bones got dug out. Even the dead people, they march on the street, not just living enemies or black people. They march on the street with the dead people's bones. And my grandmother, one of my grandmother passed away, and we knew, because we're so black, we knew the Red Guard is going to dig out her body, her coffin. She was not cremated. So we rushed it before the Red Guard found her grave, because she was buried to the very edge of the cemetery. And they went to search, they couldn't find. So we went there, we got it out, we bribed the cremation place to burn her. And they said, we have life, freshly dead people, we don't even have enough capacity to burn. We call, you're dead. So, but my aunt had some connections and some money and paid them. So we burned my grandma's corpse And so we preserved ashes somewhere only us know. Communists will do that to even dead people. So how can I trust them? When I heard them say one country, two system, I said, no way. When they say, oh, this cemetery is beautiful, it's promised, always yours, I say, no way. If you buy a home, you think that's your home forever. No, never guaranteed. So I've seen all their behaviors. None of their promise they will keep, unless it's for their own benefit.
So people have seen, these protests have been happening for years now as the Chinese government has stripped essentially democratic rights, the right to vote for the people that you want, and the right to speak, the right to gather in the streets. I'm thinking of basic constitutional rights that we have in this country. And the government has gotten more violent, and more people in Hong Kong have shown up in the streets. And one of the things they've done is they've brought American flags to these protests. And the people in Hong Kong essentially are celebrating American values, while mainland China is trying to suppress all of those instincts. But it's hard to do because the people in Hong Kong have been free.
Yes. Actually, only one promise Chinese government kept until today is the freedom to demonstrate, to have assembly. So Hong Kong people use that. In China, if a church has a 200 congregation, it's already violating the rule. 50 people is maximum. So also, not just to Hong Kong people, to all Chinese people, United States of America represent the free land of free. That's why so many people want to immigrate to United States. Now the biggest, biggest group and easiest way to do is to have their child born in the United States. And it was such a big industry. And when they get born in the United States, they were at least, they said, 20 years later, we have American citizen and can bring our home family to United States. The Chinese people are so desperate. And so when the Hong Kong people demonstrate, they look up to United States to be on their side, because that's the kind of system and the life they admire, they want to have.
The values,
yeah. The principles, the ideas, and the philosophy, the beliefs. So naturally, they will have American flags, and they plead to President Trump to help us. And on the other hand, actually, that's another statement they're making, because just before that, China was heavily demonized United States in the ideology level. Say no to Western ideas. Say no to Western this. Say no to Western that. And say no to Christmas. That's not our holiday. It's a United States American holiday.
So an actual war on Christmas.
Yeah. Ban Christmas trees and everything. But when we said, but they don't usually say United States, they say West. And some people ask, wasn't Marx a Westerner? Wasn't communism a Western idea? But no Chinese thought about that. They thought Marxism was Chinese. So the Hong Kong people had the American flag also give a message, say, you ban them, you're anti-United States, we're for it. But not necessarily for the material things, So there's two reasons, I think.
Yeah.
They have the American flag.
So let's Hong Kongers are embracing American values, and let's go full circle here. According to this poll that I read earlier, too many young people are embracing the Communist Manifesto. Instead, you travel the world telling the story, and the story gets deeper and darker. I've heard other things that you've told me. What do you say to young people who think that socialism is cool?
When you give up your autonomy and power and freedom to be the owner of your own life, you're giving up life. You said, government, provide me this, give me free education, give me free this, provide this, and provide that. You're giving up your own power to control of your own life. The more the government's bigger, the smaller you get, and doesn't exist. You're just an instrument or a toy to the government. They can place you any way they want to. They can play with your life any way they want to. Actually, I just read it. The Xi Jinping's talk yesterday. They say our whole country is a big chess game. Everybody is a piece on the chess board. He said that. That's he want people to be. He said,
cogs.
Yeah, we are a whole country, so we're one game. And that's what socialist is. And young people, if you think you want government to give you this and give you that, they're not just going to just give it to you. They were going to tell you how to use it, when to use it. If you can use it, you cannot use it. Until you realize you can't even decide what to eat for dinner. How many times you can sleep with your wife? The government decide on that too. It's not a joke. I remember at that time, if the couple they don't live in the same city, government gave them 2 months a year together holiday, 2 times a year, each time 1 month. That's all they can be together. That's how the government take care of you. The young people grown up in the internet age, there's no border. That's only one area. There's no border, almost no regulation. Like,
no rules.
Yeah, no rules. They're
you're
so
free.
used to that.
Yeah.
One day, just wait until one day the government said, no, you cannot have any access on the internet because it's damage your brain. Not good for you. And all the information on the internet is not healthy for you. Totally banned. I don't think anybody still think socialist is cool.
Let's hope.
But it will happen if they ask government to take care of them. That will come, definitely. China is that way now.
Thank you. Thank you for telling that story. And let's hope that we reached a lot of people that are headed in the wrong direction.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks for watching Kibbe on Liberty. By now, you know this is the most important event of your week. So make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Click the little bell so you get notifications. Kibbe on Liberty, mostly honest conversations with mostly interesting people.